questions. So today we are going to talk about I need EMR data. Now what? Presented by Abby Fisher with some help of our wonderful IT colleagues, along with a real world EMR data request by Kylie Kimball. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. We will help field the questions, but remember it is all teach, all learn. So feel free to share both questions and answers. And in the interest of time, we're not going to be introducing all of our participants, but I am going to ask our hub team to introduce themselves. And we'll start with wonderful LJ. Would you like to say good morning?
I would. Hi, everyone. I'm LJ Van Scoy, and I do research on end-of-life communication and advanced care planning. And I'm really excited for this session because one of our lab members is one of our presenters, Kylie Kimball, using a real-world example from our lab. Just as some background for me, I'm really excited to learn a lot in this session because we are starting to move into some of our research into more health-based systems and out of, well, we work in community systems, but also health systems. And so I'm just really excited to hear about everyone in the room's experiences getting data out of the charts and making these requests. So thank you all for being here, and please put all your wisdom in the chat.
Yes, thank you, LJ, and thank you, Kylie, in advance, because I've heard your SOP is fabulous. So thank you. And Steve, would you like to say good morning?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Hicks. I'm a physician scientist in general pediatrics.
Thanks, Steve. Our wonderful Erica is out of the office today, and so I'm going to have Abby introduce herself, and she is going to introduce our IT wonderful colleagues, and she and Kylie are going to start the presentation. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Take it
absolutely.
away, Abby.
Hi, thanks, Jess. So my name is Abby Fisher. I'm a research project manager with the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, also known as CTSI, here at based at the College of Medicine. But as I think most folks know, the CTSI serves the entire university. So I'm really glad that we have a couple of folks from University Park and perhaps some other campuses joining us this morning. So I have the privilege of, I'm going to introduce our kind of guests and our special subject matter experts this morning. So Kylie, before we get started, how about you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. So yes, my name is Kylie. As LJ alluded to, I'm one of the research project managers on her team. I focus specifically on working with end-of-life communication in cancer patients and individuals with mild cognitive impairment. And I've had the pleasure of doing this type of report twice now, so I'm very excited to share what I've learned.
Great. Thank you. And next we have, so this is the EIM. So it's going to be acronym palooza today. So we're going to go over some common terms so that everyone's kind of on the same page. But it's our comm data team is with us this morning. So I'm going to introduce Masayo first. Go ahead and say hello and tell us about yourself.
Morning, everyone. My name is Masayo Messler. I work for Ron Bischoff on the comm data team, and I've been pulling research data for about 7 years.
And the very first time I had to do a report, poor Masayo had the misfortune of working with me and explaining everything to me. So I'm so grateful that you are still here with the team, and the processes have improved greatly since then. So thank you for joining us. And next we have Ron.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Ron Bischoff. I am the manager of the comm data team. I've been here almost a year and a half, so I still haven't found everything that this organization has to offer. We have lots of opportunities. So look forward to the presentation and seeing how we can assist everyone.
Thank you so much. And then I don't see Vanna's name. Vanna, are you here? I don't see your name in the participant list. Vanna Ober is another member of the team, and if you are here, you can introduce yourself. If not, we can introduce you a little bit later when she joins. Yeah. Okay. No worries. Hope she's okay.
I don't see her. Yeah.
All good. All good. If she joins later, that would be great, but no worries. So we're going to go ahead and get into the presentation. So what we're doing today is a little bit of a hybrid. We're kind of interspersing the case throughout, and Kylie's going to do a live demo of some of the methods that we're using for EMR data. So I'm going to get us started, and let me find my presentation. So we do ask, if you have any questions, we ask that you either put those in the chat, or we'll have plenty of time at the end of the presentation to go over those. And we have lots of resources for you all as well that we're going to share. So we'll share the slides, and pretty much everything we're talking about is going to be available after the session. All right, so I wanted to quick clarify, and I'm really grateful for the EIM data team for supporting this presentation, because they helped me clarify a lot of the terminology that we're using. So just wanted to be really clear that the purpose of today's session is I need EMR data for research. So research has a whole set of regulations and stipulations for appropriate use of EMR data. So we're not talking about anything clinical. I mean, it's clinical research, but we're not talking about just like looking at patient records because they're coming into your clinic tomorrow for an appointment. So that's not what we're talking about. We are focused strictly for data, including recruitment, data collection, things like that. So as I mentioned, information here was created in partnership with the EIM COM data team. We are going to be talking about identifiable data from the EMR. So there are some really great tools for obtaining data that is de-identified, that doesn't require, for example, IRB approval, such as Trinetics and some other databases. That's kind of outside of the scope of what we're going to talk about today. And we anticipate probably having some kind of now what or future educational materials about Trinetics and those other resources. All right, so by the end of today, hopefully you know how to describe when it's appropriate to obtain data from the EMR, understand the process of the data request, and utilize the data for patient recruitment in research. All right, so first of all, how do you determine whether you need EMR data from the Penn State Health EMR system for research? So just wanted to, again, set the stage, kind of clarify what we're talking about here. So these are some of the ways, I think these are the primary types of research that all of you may be doing where you need to access data from the EMR. So that can include retrospective chart reviews, reviewing patient charts for screening purposes, and then with the anticipation that you're going to recruit and consent them into your study. Prospective chart reviews are collecting clinical data for existing participants. And the one that we're going to focus on today is human subjects and our clinical trial recruitment of Penn State Health patients. So a key point here is that research, as I mentioned, research involves extra protections for patient data within the EMR. So you can't just go willy-nilly into the EMR looking for people to recruit for your study. You need to get IRB approval. There's a whole process in place for that we'll go over today. I also wanted to mention, so for those of us who are joining us from University Park or a Commonwealth campus, you may already be aware of this, but there is a restriction on who can access data. So basically, you need to be a College of Medicine faculty member or have a faculty appointment at the COM. So you can do that if you're from UP or another campus, or you have to be working with a collaborator at the College of Medicine who would then make the request for the EMR data. Basically, I just learned recently that UP and some of the other campuses are not what we call covered entities for HIPAA data and other types of data from the EMR. So we can get into that if you have questions, but I'm gonna skim over that a little bit. But basically, you need to be COM-based or have a faculty appointment at the COM to get the data from the EMR. All right, so some common terminology. So the EM or EHR, depending on how you refer to it, but that stands for the electronic medical or electronic health record. We typically call it the EMR here at Penn State Health when we're talking about these, but certainly EHR is basically the same thing. EIM, so that is the Enterprise Information Management System. So the Penn State EMR is an EIM system, so an enterprise system. A RITM is a requested item. So that's the acronym that if you ever submit a request, your request is assigned a number, a RITM number. So it's a term used by IT and our colleagues from the EIM team for requests, and it's associated with that tracking number. MRN is medical record number. Design spec. So that we're going to show you some examples of a design spec, but basically it's a data design specification form. So when the EIM team is actually programming a query to look for this data within the EIM or the EMR system, they are creating a document that helps them program the report for you. So they'll work with you, with your research team to create that and get approval for that design spec. But that's just what that stands for. And then I hope everybody knows what an ICD code is, but just in case you don't, it stands for International Classification of Diseases. And it's basically a code that is widely used in EMR. So diagnoses, symptoms, other health condition information all have what we call an ICD code. The ICD-10 is the one that we're currently using. You may know that there was an ICD-9 that we transitioned around 2015 into ICD-10, and then there's an ICD-11. But basically, for the purposes of today, we're going to focus on the ICD-10, but that's what that is, if you are not aware. Okay, so how do I get data from the EMR for research? So we're going to have Kylie kind of go over this scenario first. Then I'll go through a step-by-step that I work. Kylie has this wonderful standard operating procedure on how to do all of this, and really grateful for her that most of what you're seeing today came from her SOP along with support from the EIM team. But she's going to review the scenario. I'll give us a step-by-step, and then she's going to do a live demo of it.
Yes, thank you, Abby. So as I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of work with cancer patients. So that's where this scenario is based. So essentially, I'm an RPM whose PI, also LJ, would like to identify potentially eligible patients to participate in a study by ICD-10 code. So for this study, I want to identify individuals who have been seen in the past year at a Penn State Cancer Institute clinic and have been diagnosed with either breast, gastrointestinal, genitourinary, head and neck, lung, or melanoma cancers. If possible, I want to collect information about the patient's specific cancer diagnosis, preferred language, race, ethnicity, and contact information.
And she wants to know, now what does she do? So we're going to go through the scenarios. So basically, the first thing that you want to do, and there is a lot of information on these slides. I'm not going to go through every single word on here, but this, along with the SOP that we'll provide to you, is a good tool to kind of do a step-by-step of how to get your data. So the primary thing that you want to make sure that you have in place before you reach out is your actual search criteria. So you can do that a couple of ways. One, if you have inclusion/exclusion criteria in your research plan and IRB protocol, you can use that to identify the patient population that you're looking for. If you haven't done that yet, you should do that first. And then also be as specific as possible. I'll get to turnaround times for reporting a little bit later, but the more specific you can be, the easier it is for your analyst to be able to create a really specific query that gets at the people that you really want to recruit for your study. And so the more that you can be clear about that upfront, the easier it is to get the data that you're looking for. So this, the ICD tool, this is from the CDC, so you can use that if you're not sure about your ICD codes. So you want to find ICD codes that you're looking for. You want to be specific about the output data fields that you need. So basically, what are the fields in your report that you want for each of these patients? You want to know that if you're recruiting them for research and you're mailing them letters, you certainly want to know their name, their date of birth, their address, maybe a phone number, maybe language spoken, other things. And then the date and time range that you want to look for. So if they came in for an appointment at a certain time within a 6-month range or so, you want to make sure that that's all included in your report. So just have some criteria examples. So good criteria is really specific. Let's say you're looking for folks with diabetes, so you include the ICD-10 code for diabetes mellitus, currently prescribed insulin, age, a certain age range. They had an ED visit in the past 6 months for hypoglycemia, something like that. Not great search criteria is more vague. And so you don't want to just look for people with diabetes because that is many, many, many people, and you're going to get way more data than you actually need for your search. So there are actually two different ways of requesting information from the EIM. So one of them is the easier way, and I'm going to ask our colleagues, so Masayo and Ron. Basically, they created this really handy self-service design specification. So this is for us as researchers to be able to access. We do have a copy of this that we'll provide in the resources. And so basically you can fill all this information out yourself and submit it directly to the IRB for approval. So we know that the term simple is a little bit vague. So I just wanted to ask Masayo to clarify when it's most appropriate to use this form and when something may be more complex that may require folks to go through the traditional channel that I'll show everybody in a second.
I would say that if you've done a request before and you've been here for a little while and you understand what fields are available, you could use the self-service request form. And also if it's as we said, a simple request, if it's got something that's time dependent and has a lot of, I'll give you an example, if you're doing, you want all the records of people who've had synthetic femoral arteries, procedures, who've had one of 15 comorbidities, and you'd want to know what their blood pressure, HbA1c, height and weight were on the day of the procedure. That's a little more complex, and it's easier to talk through something like that with us than to display it on the form.
Mm-hmm. Great. For this one, you can see, it does include the ICD codes, the entity that you want to, some of the lab values. So for something that's a little bit more simple, you would use this form. And there's never harm in using the more complex system. This is just, if it's, like you said, a little bit more time sensitive and you just want to, what you need and you want to take care of it pretty quickly. You can use this method. So this would go directly to the IRB, and then everything else I'm about to tell you is then the next step after this happens. But just wanted to let folks know that this is available because I didn't actually know about this until we started working together on this presentation. So thank you so much for that. All right, so for more complex requests, or if you've never done this before and you want some help, there's no harm in that. So the more traditional request that some of us may be familiar with is to submit a request via the EIM request form in ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is like our IT portal, basically. And Kylie is going to do a demo of this in a little bit. I'm not going to go through all the step-by-step. She'll show you that in a second. But I just wanted to share a hint that you can start this process at the same time that you're starting your IRB protocol submission. You can do the two things in tandem while you're waiting for the EIM to get back to you. But per the IRB, they want this to be submitted, the design spec document to be submitted along with your protocol. So whether you're using the self-service form or this form, you basically need to submit it at the same time that you're submitting your IRB protocol, because you don't want to do a modification later and then it's delaying all the things. And they also want to make sure that your design spec matches your inclusion and exclusion criteria. All right, so then the next step, if you are going the traditional route, you want to prepare to meet with your EIM analyst. So basically you submit that form, you'll be assigned to one of the team members that works with Masayo and Ron and Vanna, and they will work with you to clarify your request. So some of the information that you want to be prepared with is, what are you trying to determine with the data? What's the goal of the study? Are you going to contact patients? So meaning, are you going to call them, send them a letter, somehow do proactive outreach to them to recruit them to your study? Another important point is whether this is a one-time report, meaning you're only doing this one time, or will you need to do periodic updates to get new patient data? So for example, the first time that I worked with Masayo, we had a recruitment period of, I think it was 2 years. So roughly once a quarter, we would get a new list of patients from the EMR who may have been new patients, or they may have newly qualified for the study and that weren't included in our initial report. So they can do periodic refreshing of the data that you're looking for. And then the analyst will create the design spec that I mentioned earlier. So this form looks different from the self-service form. It's just a lot more detailed. And again, we'll have an example of this in the SOP that Kylie provided. And I think we have an actual document example in the resources that we'll send out. Lots of really detailed information. Again, that helps the EIM team to set up the report and get the data. And then as I mentioned, so you submit it to the IRB for approval. You submit it when you submit your full protocol submission at the beginning of your study to get IRB approval. And then a couple of notes about your IRB protocol. If you are using this route, there are some sections in the protocols, the protocol documents that you want to update. So if you're using the HRP 591, which is usually like the most well-known, I guess, protocol template, sections 4.1 and 4.2.1 are about recruitment, and then section 7 is about study procedures. The section numbers are slightly different for other protocol types, but basically it's the same idea, is that you need to let them know that you're using the EIM system for identifying and recruiting subjects. And then if you're at the College of Medicine, you also have to submit 598 and just question number 1 about the different types of identifiers that you're getting from the EMR. And then you will upload those in question 3 on the local documents page in CATS. All right, so I'm going to stop here really quickly for any questions. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, LJ mentioned in the chat, if anyone, oh, I'm sorry, she asked what the expected turnaround time for the simple form request. So I think what we'll do is stop here and talk about the turnaround time. So Masayo or Ron, so basically after you get IRB approval, what is the standard turnaround time for both the simple form and the more complex form?
So once you get your approval back, you would create a ticket in ServiceNow for us to pull the data. Mm-hmm. And we try to acknowledge that as soon as possible that we've received that ticket. And I think our turnaround time is about 24 hours for acknowledging it. And that's, business Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. If it's a straightforward request, like I want patients with head and neck cancer, and I want their names and addresses, emails, and telephone numbers, we can run that through Trinetics, typically within 3 days to create the query, run it, and then QA it against PowerChart, and then get that back to you. If it's something that's more complex, it depends. It could take, 4 or 5 days. It could take longer, just depending on the complexity. I'm doing one for Gabby Lang right now. It wasn't a self-service one, but it's a little bit more complex, and it takes so very long to run. I try to run it on weekends because she's asked for many, many variables. And hers is, over a month and a half right now. But I did get her chunks of the data that she could start working before she receives the entire data set. Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, that's because of the system itself is so complex. It's kind of churning out.
It's churning out. She has a long time frame. And Gabby, I hope it's okay if I share what you're working on a little bit.
You just said you're the best in the chat.
That's completely fine.
It's children, pediatric patients, I believe, that have taken an opioid within maybe a 10 or 15 year period. And then she has about 20 different comorbidities. Did they have, of the ones that have been seen and have been prescribed an opioid, have they had, blood pressure issues? Have they had addiction issues? Have they had, it's a litany of things. Mm-hmm. And because of that, the system has to go through. I try and run it on the weekends just because there's fewer constraints on the system on the weekends and it runs faster. But it's, the alternative is that she and her team would have to go through every record of people that have been treated with opioids and find all this specific information. And even though it's taking the system a long time, it's using less man hours for her team. So I think it's still a win.
That's great. Can I ask a question about that? And Gabby, thanks for sharing your study with us so that we can learn from it. I appreciate it. So, you mentioned, Masayo, that you she was Gabby is looking for problems with blood pressure as one of the variables, people that have had problems with blood pressure. How do you recommend people make, I mean, I guess this is for PIs, but how do you as the EIM data analyst, how do you ask them to define that? Is that something you help make recommendations saying, hey, we think that, you know, people that have an ICD-10 code of hypertension, that's how we should search for it. Or we think that, you know, if you have a blood pressure cutoff, we can search the EMR and pull it that way. So who makes those decisions, and are you, as your group, involved in those decisions?
Well, to be clear, none of us have a clinical background. You know, what we've learned is from the folks like yourselves, what some of the constraints are. Especially if someone is new, we might recommend, you know, we could look at a diagnosis code for hypertension. That might be an indicator. But preferably, we would have the researcher say, I want somebody whose blood pressure within the last year was over 190 over 90 or something like that. So very specific, discrete cutoffs. Yes.
Interesting. Gabby, do you have anything to weigh in on that? You're the
So for our study, because they had so many different medical like baseline conditions they're looking at, I gave Masayo a list of all the ICD-10 and ICD-9 codes. And then she made this whole great Excel sheet, and it's broken down into tabs, and it says, like, yes, they have one of the bigger overarching, like, I don't even know one of the examples, but then she has a different tab and it breaks it down by all the specific codes then to find which one that we actually need. And for that project, we are looking at data over 10 years, and the sponsor keeps asking me how many eligible patients do we have, and Masayo's found that we have over or about 17,000 patients that were prescribed these medications. So it's been wonderful working with her, and she's really helped us so much, and we always appreciate her help.
Well, thank you, Gabby. That's nice.
Yes, thank you, Masayo.
Great. I love that. Can I ask one follow-up question? And I actually put it in the chat about, are there any places that anyone on this call has looked or seen or found that has, you know, if you say, okay, I need all the ICD-10 codes for hypertension, how does the staff go and find that? Are there places where, I'm sure that people have like validated phenotypes or something. Is there something like that or a resource out there, or do you just have to find it on your own?
What I've done is just Google, honestly. And I'll find like one good page, and then it shows me the conversions between the ICD-9 and ICD-10, and it usually just lists all of them out. But I don't have any reliable source per se.
Great. Yeah, Gabby, thank you so much. If you have any, you know, that like your go-to site, if you wouldn't mind, if you have it handy, put it in the chat. If not, you can email one of us for sure. But it may be, I'm not sure if it's disease specific or anything, but any resources or that you'd like to share with the group are really, really welcome. And Gabby, one more question. Is this, are you doing a retrospective chart review, or what's your research design?
Yeah, we're doing retrospective from 2011 to 2021.
Great.
Looking at patients who are prescribed Oxycontin, oxycodone, and then a bunch of other different opioids that they're looking at as the con meds.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys. And I'll definitely post that in the chat, the ones that I use.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions about what we talked about so far? We do have, you know, some more to go over, but I didn't want to stop the discussion if there are any burning questions. Great. And really quickly, I see that Vanna has joined us. So thank you so much, Vanna. Would you like to introduce yourself? Let me just put you on the spot.
I apologize that I had another meeting and I was late. Yeah, so my name is Vanna Ober. So I'm working with Masayo. I'm a programmer analyst. Yeah, so we both reporting to Ron. So I've been with the Penn State Health for about 8 years, but I joined the com research last year. So it's about a year now.
Thank you so much. Alrighty, so just to basically after you submit the forms, looking here at step 6. So after you submit your forms, you're going to get the little watermarked. Sure, you're all familiar with the little watermark document, and then you can basically resubmit it to your analyst. So I think Kylie had mentioned that she emailed it directly to her analyst because she was already assigned one. Is that the recommended approach, or do you recommend going back through? That's anybody on the team, but do you recommend going back through ServiceNow?
If an analyst has already been assigned the ticket, you can just email the analyst with the approval. That would be the best way. If it's a self-serve, obviously we haven't received a ticket yet, and you would submit a ticket through ServiceNow.
Makes sense. All right. So just keep going. So I am going to ask Kylie a little bit more about this one, but to give some feedback. So basically the report is created. It's basically an Excel document or a CSV file, but it has all of your all the information from the report. This is de-identified. Just wanted to make that clear that there's no identifying information on here, I don't think. But basically you would get this document. So they'll create your analyst will create a Teams folder through the Penn State Health Teams to share the information with you in a secure manner. And then you can go in to the report. And Kylie, I know when you and I talked, you mentioned about cleaning the data. Is there any guidance that you wanted to share here?
Yeah, I think what's important, when I first did this thing, I had no idea what the output was going to be. So it was kind of reassuring that it's just an Excel file. I'm used to working with Excel files. But as you go through, you can kind of search, and thankfully all of the columns, they're able to be sorted. So you can find, if you're looking specifically for an ethnicity, if you're looking for a language, those are really helpful. And then just making sure when I first did my report, I ended up having patients listed and there was multiple ICD-10 codes. So then if a patient had multiple ICD-10 codes, they have multiple different lines. Then I had to go through and kind of get rid of the duplicates. I've now learned from that, and like when I'm designing the report, it's really helpful. But just trying to get a sense of the data I think for the final report that this is referring to, there was about 5,000 different individuals. And so there's a lot of different options, and how this is currently set up, it kind of gives you the ICD-10 code, and there's a little key on the side of the screen that tells me what the ICD-10 code is. And then the other variables we were looking at, like their race, gender, age, all of that fun stuff. So it's really becoming familiar. And then when I did that, I did a lot of conditional formatting then of my Excel table to try and figure out when I'm trying to purposefully sample people and I'm looking for specifically maybe someone that is speaks Spanish and has a certain ICD-10 code, you can kind of easily search for it, as opposed to then like trying to scroll through the many different entries. So it took me a little bit of time to get used to it, but it's definitely a very helpful. Then it kind of became a database for me as I moved forward with that project.
Great.
Do you mind if I just jump in and make a quick comment again?
Please.
Sorry, I know I'm not a presenter.
No, you're good.
I just one thing I just wanted to mention, when Messiah sends me these crazy long Excel sheets and I kind of have to like filter through them, one thing I noticed that's very helpful to use is a pivot table or a pivot chart. And that really helps with being able to filter down. And when she sent me a long list of over 600,000 rows, I was able to narrow it down to like 3,000 specific MRNs, and that's super helpful too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the main thing is don't take it and just, if you're doing a chart review, like don't just send it to your statistician, just actually you have to go through and clean it and validate the data. So thank you all for that really great input. So, all right. So then we may get quite a few questions on this one. So ask away if you have any questions. So basically, I don't know that everyone is aware of this. This was instituted, I think 2017-ish. But basically, because we're using Penn State Health data, and if you are contacting patients by phone or mail, anything, or through the EMR portal, directly and proactively reaching out to patients to ask them to participate in your study or something like that. Because Penn State Health is it's under Penn State, but technically they have kind of a separate board, and we're kind of using their data for Penn State University research purposes. A little confusing. Anyway, there was a mandate put in place several years ago that they're basically to ensure that we are not contacting anyone who is deceased, because I was involved in a study team. We accidentally sent a letter to a donor who was deceased and caused a bit of a hubbub. So please don't do that if at all possible. We had no idea, because I don't remember if we didn't mention that we wanted deceased patients, but also it's entirely possible that our EMR just does not capture that they've died if they didn't die at the hospital. You know, we don't have any, you know, way of knowing that within the Penn State health system. So however, we are also responsible to the Penn State Health Board to ensure that, as it says here, all patient communications are conducted as accurately and thoroughly as possible. And so a few years ago, like I said, the marketing team put in place a secondary kind of process within patient recruitment or patient, you know, working with patient data. So basically, what you'll need to do is two things. One is get approval from our marketing director at the College of Medicine. Her name is Stacy Beers, as well as Neil Thomas, who is our associate dean of clinical research. So I had heard that there were kind of two ways to do this. One is that the EIM analyst can do this, but also the research team could reach out. So Masayo or Ron or Vanna, do you have a recommended person? Do you typically reach out, or do you recommend that the research team reach out? Do you have a preference?
Well, we usually reach out and get Neil and Stacy's approval before we send the researcher the data. And that way we've checked the box, and
Right.
we can assure that that they know what to do.
Okay, great. And then they'll give approval via email. And then you are then able to do step number 2, which is reaching out to an outside marketing company that we work with. So all of the agreements are in place, that the data is kept secure, and their name is Allegra. So again, Kylie has a lot more details of how to reach out to Allegra in her SOP, but just wanted to mention that they will review. They have their own kind of proprietary system of looking up people who are deceased. And so they're basically cleaning up your data for decedents. So the prices are there, and the turnaround time is about a week. But as I mentioned, they have the system set up so that all the data sending back and forth is secure. I did learn from Jess Byler that they have limited ability to search for data on children. I don't know, Jess, if you want to mention in the chat if you've had any issues with that, but just wanted to note that as well. And then I think the last step is to keep your data in a secure location. So you can keep it in that Penn State Health Teams, or you can look at our Penn State data storage finder. It's always a very good idea to password protect your files. And I should mention, if you are mailing anything, it's perfectly fine to send recruitment materials through mail services. So that's you know, totally, I've done that a million times, send some letters out, and the information is like, they're equipped to handle patient data to send it out to them. So I just actually attended a session yesterday about the data storage finder. So we're getting some more information about that. May also be a future Now What session, but just wanted to mention that there are solutions to keep your data in a secure location. All right, so now we're going to turn things over to Kylie to do a demo of the actual request form. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Kylie, and I will also look through the chat if there are any questions.
Okay, great. So as just a quick refresher, we're looking to identify people that have all sorts of cancers. I think for the purposes of this request, we're going to focus just on breast cancer. So we don't have a million ICD-10 codes. We still get the flavor as to what you're supposed to do. So once you navigate to the ServiceNow page, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, it's our IT portal. You're gonna go to browse our service catalog. And then in that, there's this menu on the side, and you're going to actually look for the data and analytics services and then request a scorecard dashboard report service. And that will take you to the request form. And this is where you're going to give all the information that'll then get to the EIM team about the report. So the request date, that's all the same. Subject area, if this is for research, all of our stuff is for research. The subject area would just be research. And then a subject area, and then date report needed. If you have a specific date, you can put it there. Mine, I've never had a date that it's required, so I usually leave it blank. Type of request, you're going to do new or modification to report, since this is going to be a new report. And then reason for request is going to be research again. And again, this is all in the SOP for, it kind of lays out the steps. IRB number, so this has already been IRB approved. So I'm going to enter our IRB number. And so we have to do the funding. This is funded under other sources. This is an internal grant. If you have NIH here or CTSA, it will also, if you do NIH, there'll be an area where you can then put your grant number. For my specific study, we do not have a funding number, so we'll leave that one blank. Then provide a detailed description of the request. So this is like a paragraph box, so you can kind of need to put as much information as possible, but also making it clearly so it's able to be understood by the analyst. So I have a paragraph that I'm using from one of my old things, and I can kind of talk through what is in the paragraph. So we're looking for assistance for creating a report that has for all patients that have been identified to have our ICD-10 code of breast cancer, which is C50.91. And then a few more things that are about eligibility. So these patients should have been seen at a Penn State Health facility in the past 1 year. And then in terms of the data fields, I would like the report should include MRN, name, age, sex, address, language, race, ethnicity, date of last appointment, or outpatient clinic visit, and diagnosis code. And then a few more eligibility things. These patients should be older than 18 years old and currently not marked as deceased in their chart. And then from there, you would hit submit, and then it kind of just becomes like any other IT ticket, and it will go to the EIM team. And then, as they mentioned, they'll follow up with you after that, confirming that they have received it. And then the next step for me was Messiah was actually my analyst for this project. So then me and Messiah met and kind of went over the details, and we talked through any specific questions that she had as she went through and tried to fill out the design specification form. So it's pretty easy if you know where to look. I think when I first was looking, it's hard to identify where exactly you're supposed to go in IT in the ServiceNow. But it's once you get there, it's a pretty simple form. Are there any questions on that process? No? Awesome. Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Abby.
Fantastic. And I just saw in the chat, there is a very good question from Chelsea about, can't we just use mail or print services, because they can do that as well. So my understanding and verified with the EIM, the data team, that we have to use Allegra. That's always been my understanding, but I'm more than happy to reach out to Neil Thomas, kind of oversees that so I can reach out to him and Stacy, unless anyone has other information that I'm not aware of.
I think that we can use that, but if you can check with Neil to be 100% sure, and then if you would send an email out to all the attendees, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, and right, we are aware that the $175 is sometimes an unwelcome surprise when you find that out late in your process, if you're not aware of that. And my understanding is it's per report, so regardless of might be regardless of number of patients, but if you're doing, periodically getting data from the EMR, and then you have to send it to them every time, they're charging you that amount every single time that you ask them to clean it up. So, and the 175 is if you're contacting participants there. If you're doing like a chart review, and you're not mailing anything, there's still a fee of $110 just to review it. Thank you, Chelsea. Very good information. So if there is a no cost or a cheaper option, I will definitely share that, but really appreciate that question. So basically just wanted to share a couple more things before we get more into the discussion. Let me find my slides again. All right, so just wanted to share some resources. Oops. As I mentioned, we're going to show the SOP, a sample design spec, a sample, the sample report that we shared, as well as the self-service design spec, which is I think it's a Word document or PDF that it's the form that you can fill out on your own. If you have any questions, please, of course, feel free to reach out to the ComData team. I always say, and if you learn nothing else from Now What, it's just find your person and rely on them for, they're here to help. And they want to make our lives easier, and we want to make their lives easier too. So if you ever have any questions, find your people and reach out to them. Really want to thank Ron, Vanna, and Masayo, Jody Matthew from the IRB, and Avnish from our CTSI team for your help with this presentation. But we will just open it up for any remaining questions. We have about 12 minutes. So any questions on anything that we've gone over, if you have a specific scenario that you'd like to learn more about, this is really your opportunity to talk to the experts. So please feel free to put in the chat or unmute yourself and ask any questions. Or if anyone has an experience that you'd like to share.
I know we were talking about eliminating decedents for a mailing list, but please recognize that that includes if you're requesting an email list or if you're requesting telephone numbers, that we still have to run and eliminate the decedents from the list.
Thank you. All right. Oh, Jess, you had a question about how long does it take? The average turnaround is a week. Kylie, was that your experience? Oh, typically really
I
fast.
say, yeah, it's usually quicker than a week, but they tell you a week. So if something comes up, it's not as upsetting. But I think mine, I submitted it on like a Tuesday, and by Thursday afternoon, I had everything that I needed and was able to continue.
Yeah, it also depends on resource availability and other requests and priorities that come in. So yes.
Of course. Great. And I did confirm, although I put a question in the chat for the ComData team. So there is no fee to run the report through the EIM, the work that you do. But is there a reason that you would need the grant information?
Not necessarily the grant information. I would recommend it if it is going to be a large ask for IT and you are submitting for a grant, that you will get with us ahead of time and include our time into the grant for reimbursement. But unless I mean, it would have to be pretty big for that to happen. We've only done that a number of times. But other than that, I really don't think we need the grant information.
Great, that's really helpful. So basically you're saying if it's going to be a significant lift on your part, that in the proposal stage, you want to include your team.
I would absolutely recommend that, because if it's a very large ask, I may not have the resources, and the grant funding might actually bring in a consultant for you to be able to do the work itself.
Oh, great. Okay.
I have a question. If no one else I don't want to take all the questions, but I have a question as a PI I'm thinking about for the first time. Like, how can we leverage this? This is so great. So I'm thinking about chart reviews, right? So we talked about like getting a participant list and using that participant list to identify eligible patients. But I'm thinking about other studies, like maybe we have a list of 20 patients and our research staff needs to do a chart review. And the way that typically, at least in my lab, we do that is we go into their MRN, we're in Power Chart, and we're clicking around and we're finding the variables that way in real time by like in the chart. Wondering, is it possible? Are there pros and cons, I would imagine, to actually using a data poll to do that, where we give, here's the MRNs and here's the 20 variables we need. Can you pull these for us? Is that something people do? Is that a service available, or is that sort of tricky and not useful?
I don't think that sounds outside of the ordinary, Vanna, Messiah. You're on mute, Vanna.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so that's kind of outside of ordinary, because that's one is we can pull the data, but that probably followed under the other team. That's not, because we only pulling for the research requests.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, no, this would be for research. I mean, if you have participants that are enrolled in your study and you're retrospectively going back to look at their charts to see what happened during their hospitalization, that's what is that you're saying that's out of the ordinary? That's not a request that would be appropriate?
Yeah, that would fall under the other team, because for us to provide the PHI information, that has to have the IRB approval before we can provide information. But if you have like a 20 MONs, and then we can provide you the data, so that has had to be before the IRB approval. So that's going to go to another team in EIM that can handle that request.
So Lauren, if you're doing a study and you have 20 patients and you have a protocol established and an approved IRB, then yeah, we can do that for sure. And it might be, what was their blood pressure every day for the period of their length of stay, or what drugs did they get, or what were their lab results? Were there any lab results? Were there any HbA1cs over 6.0 example criteria? Or how many times were they transferred? Or did they have an advanced directive? The one thing that we cannot do at this time, and in the future that might change, is go through notes. So if there's a doctor that has procedure notes and you need to get information from the procedures on, say, what type of tumor it was, or how they bisected it or dissected it, we cannot get that, because that data on our end is stored in binary large objects and difficult to get.
Yeah, that's great. And then if you were to do that, does the research staff have to go through you every time they want to do a pull, or can they just like refresh the report and get new ones like once it's built? Or is it something you have to get a fresh report and bother you guys every time?
Well, if there is, when you go to the IRB and you say, my project for 2 years, and we're going to get monthly refreshes, what we could do is set up a scheduled report with the same criteria and say any patients from last month that met this criteria. And then that would be, a link would be emailed to the recipients that are listed on your design spec. Or, but if you have more specific questions, just please speak to one of us.
My team's gonna reach out to you, I think. Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, that it's automated. That's really great. But and also, Messiah, to your point, to make sure that the appropriate folks are listed. So obviously staff may change, but you need to make the EIM comm team needs to make sure that the appropriate individuals are on the design spec to get the information. Great. All right. Well, we have a few more minutes. Any other questions? Doesn't matter how nitty gritty.
I have a question. If you have, poor Messiah, I don't know if, I've written down your name, Messiah, since they're so brief. reviews about you. If we wanted to get a consultation with you guys, how do we go through that, like the formal way? I know, like with RedCap, you're supposed to put in like a request for a consultation. Is it that we reach out to our like favorite analyst, or is there a formal process?
Well, I guess sometimes people put in a ticket and say, you know, would like to discuss the feasibility study, and it can be assigned to an analyst. I guess that's the appropriate way. Lots of times people will just hit me up on chat, or I think hit up other analysts on chat, you know, who you're comfortable working with, and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do we have this type of data? Can we use St. Joe's data? Can we use, you know, what you need to do? And sometimes it's just a quick question, and I'm happy to answer that. And I think everybody else is too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a simple question is easy enough to handle through Teams. And
Teams
then
chat.
if you need
Oh,
more
great.
detail, and you just, you know, at that point, probably open a ticket if it's going to be a true consultation and maybe exploratory or something. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Great.
they have a central email too that I put in the chat as well. So.
Yeah, because there are a lot of fields that we have about 100 output fields that we have in Trinetics, you know, demographics. But when we use our web intelligence and also Click, Vanna's our Click expert, there are so many different fields. I'm still learning them. You know, I just found out last week that we have information on advanced directives. And I've been here for quite a while, and I did not know that. So if it's going to take a longer consultation, you know, we can answer and look for it at the same time.
Oh no, was that my team that triggered that? I bet.
I just put that in the chat. That's LJ's research. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We have a couple of announcements for the June session, so I'm going to turn things back over to Jess, but this is so helpful. And we hope that, you know, the EIM Com Data team has been incredibly generous with their time in support of this. And we hope that it cuts down a little, hopefully a little bit of your workload too, when folks are able to use the self-service form and kind of get some of the information. But they are available, and we're really, really grateful for your being with us this morning.
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your engagement and your participation. As usual, you will receive an email shortly after the session that has a link to our session evaluation. I will send out the participant resources, including Kylie's wonderful SOP, the links, emails, etc., along with our slides, early next week. Please note that there is a schedule change for June. So instead of being like the third Friday of the month, it's actually June 28th. And we will plan to do a Q&A from all of our sessions so far, review those one-pagers, come with questions, things that you've maybe experienced since, or you've had a chance to review, or maybe you've gotten from other research experience and team members. But we just wanted to let you know. So June 28th, you should have a calendar change, and we will, of course, remind you of the sessions as usual. Thank you all for your time this morning. Have a great weekend and take care.